Hi everyone, I'm Rob Drummer. I'm the artistic director at Boundless Theatre and one of the two directors of Radio Lucia, our audio fiction podcast. I'm joined here by the second director, Robert Awasusi, who was with us for the first season and is returning for the second. Hi Rob, how you doing?
Hey, I'm all right. Yeah, experience. It's been an experience.
Definitely has. We realised as a team at Boundless that today is the official 1 year anniversary of closing the office as well. So we've been working from home for a year as a team, and I don't know about you, but I've been going through those like early messages, those kind of COVID conversations, and a lot of them were with the team, obviously at Boundless. So yeah, it's been a year, mad year, but here we are, ready to almost launch the second season of this podcast of ours. How did you find? Talk to us a little bit about your work on the show so far, that first season. I'm interested in how you found it and what attracted you to fiction podcasts and working with us on the show.
Yeah, I guess it's interesting just because it has been such a journey. Like, I guess it's been a year now. We're at the end of the start of launching this second season, and kind of just thinking about the process that we took through it, because it started off as a lot of little conversations here and there. I know that was something that you mentioned before, and that's something that I'd been interested in before. And obviously, then when it became the main part of the whole Lucian project with all of the other theatres around Europe, I guess that's where it really grew, really, especially with like Nina's work on it as well. So I think for me, it's just always been interesting kind of just seeing that, okay, here's us taking all of us as theatre makers and as people who are based in theatre now trying to break into podcasting, but trying to take that same kind of discipline and put that into an audio only perspective and narrative. And that kind of, it just presents a lot of interesting challenges that like form's always something I'm just really interested in, like how you tell a story, sometimes even over what the story is, and how that kind of really changes the experience. Particularly now, this is about the listener, really.
You're so right, and I suppose that's worth saying. In the first season of Radio Lucia, we launched it just as the UK was going into full lockdown, that first lockdown in 2020, and we'd always planned to release it. And luckily, as we saw all of our future work being postponed or cancelled, theatres around the world being shut, we had this show ready to launch. We'd commissioned Nina Siegel, who predominantly writes for theatre, to write those 5 episodes, and we'd been developing them over the course of a year or so with teenagers and young adults here in London, and it was great to have something to share with audiences. And it's been really, I think for me, it's been really wonderful just to see how many people around the world have been listening to this show. And you also mentioned that it's part of this larger project, which we'll share some links and you can find out more about. And that project is a big collaboration across Europe, which is another thing that we've just been living through, obviously, for several years now on the other side of Brexit. I guess there's so much in this podcast and it's early development, and I suppose its DNA that is about collaboration and working across borders. So it's so great to have something which can be shared with audiences around the world. And we've had audiences in all sorts of countries, and that's always really great to check in on just how far and wide that audience does stretch. Unlike obviously our theatre work, we're predominantly a theatre company based in South London in the UK, and although we do make work across the country, our audience is often close to the spaces we play in. So that, I'm with you, that's been really great to have something to share with audiences over the course of the last year. And now we're back and almost ready to share the second season, and I can confirm there are 12 episodes. It's a bigger season, and I wondered, did you want to talk a bit about how that has come to pass and how we've been working? So Nina, who wrote the first season, has passed the baton on to a group of 6 writers, and we've been working with them for the last year or so. But do you want to talk a bit about that process in terms of getting those scripts ready?
It presented just a new way of working again. So I guess in a way, it's kind of, I guess the way I'm thinking about it is season 1, the stage play, and then season 2 has been like the TV series, almost in a way, because again, like that kind of writer's room format, having a group of people who are working on the same project, but also like having their own individual responsibilities as writers in there as well. That's not something that you often see, again, in theatre. And to me as well, like it was like I know what a writer's room is and I know what the expectations are and stuff like that. Actually, like working to help run that and help steer that in the right direction. That was a new experience. It was fun. It was just so super engaged. Like they all really loved the first season and what that was doing, what that was trying to do, and they just really like really firmly into that, whilst also just bringing their other ideas as well. I think that's what made it so big and expansive. That's just a sign of like really good work already, when you can build on some really strong foundations that are there, both in the story and also just what it wants to say about the world.
Definitely. Working with a group of writers for this season has been an amazing process. And when we were thinking about, when you and I were talking about this season and kind of thinking about how we build upon the world of Elucia, and both of us are really ambitious storytellers. We saw real potential in this world that had been created, and in the space of 5 fairly short episodes, we'd introduced a huge amount of ideas. And maybe we'll talk a bit in more detail about that first season and kind of what was happening in the world and where we are now. And as we return to Elucia, the kind of world we're returning to. But yeah, we took this decision to grow this group of writers to 6, and our writers range from like a 17-year-old, Sardana is 17, still studying, up to writers in their kind of mid-20s. It's an incredibly talented group of writers, diverse group of writers from all across the UK, who suddenly were also able to listen to the first season and kind of reflect back to us where they saw these characters going, or how they could imagine extending this world. And it's fair to say that the characters you will have heard and hopefully love from the first season are back with us, but we've been able to put them through so much more by having that kind of larger group. I was always really inspired by our writers group. We had them every week. We spent a kind of couple of hours together and shared some of the writing, did a lot of very detailed story work, and really we had our moments of real like breakthrough and really wonderful character and story development. And then some nights it just felt, how are we going to solve this problem? Or we got stuck in like continuity or logic hell. But it is a credit to all those writers pulling through and not losing sight of their ambition. This is a show that's inspired really heavily by youth culture, youth activism. It started off as an sort of exploration of power and protest, of utopia, and all of those themes are present. But I also think we've gained this is much more youthful, energetic. We've got stories here about people who are in kind of crisis, people who are overcoming negative experiences in their lives, and people who are coming together and forming new relationships. And all of that is done with such generosity, which I'm really looking forward to sharing with people when we launch the show. Tell us a bit about that, that first season. So it was commissioned in 2018, 2019. We started thinking about it, and then we recorded it February last year and launched it in the spring. And that was all just on the cusp of COVID, this global pandemic, and so much else, but was inspired by youth protest, right? It was inspired by, not just here in the UK, but it was inspired by the events and the experiences of young people around the world. What's your kind of reflection now, looking back on that first season and what was happening in the world, and what have you taken from that? What suddenly felt just really sort of deeply to connect in terms of those ideas in the show and in the world?
It's just weird how like close they run in with each other. There's always like, you said it, but how art imitates life, and like vice versa. I just think we just unexpectedly tapped into that, really. I think there's something about thinking about authority, thinking about how like the state exercises in various ways around the world. Yeah, I think we definitely weren't thinking about, the virus and like quarantine and all that when like it was actually made. But then like suddenly when it came out into that, and especially with, again, even like more recent events again now, thinking about what that kind of does to people, I think, both from the politics of it, but also just from like a human perspective as well. I think especially season 2 kind of more so than season 1, I think as well. I think season 2 really had physically more space to build on that. It's a lot, and I think that's what it is. Often youth culture is always a very interesting thing, because it's like, what is it? In a way, like youth culture is just mainstream pop culture. In some ways it's so much more. In other ways there's so many different subsects of that, and I think in various ways I think we've been quite good, not necessarily as an intention, but as on reflection, like highlighting at times happening and really zooming into some of those focuses as well in our own sci-fi kind of unique way, but just seeing how everyone kind of differs from each other, really, like in terms of, here are the things that we want in life, here's how we're going to try and get that, we're going to try and do that through more kind of disruptive means, or we're going to try and like game the system, or we're going to try and just put our heads down and try and just get on with it. And that, again, that's just real life, that's characters, that's human nature, really.
I certainly remember saying to the writers when we started in the writers' room, hey, look, there's a choice to be made around the pandemic, and Lucia is a fictional world, and the rules are there to be established by the writers. But how do we feel about a pandemic? Is there something we want to reflect upon through the writing of this show? And I think we all came to the conclusion that it wasn't then the right time, and I'm really glad of this, to directly link our story to what was happening in the world. And I'm really glad of that, because I still think there's so much for us all to process just with COVID, and that's before we get to the events that have, taken place across societies around the world in the last year that have certainly been exacerbated as a result of COVID. We've had much more time, I hope, to think about injustice and racism, and there's so much that this writers group brought into this process. I feel like we were really talking about the world, whether that was through the lens of the presidential election in America or kind of political events here in the UK. But I'm really glad that an event that was similar in Lucia has remained outside of the story. Although I do think there's a tone to the show that I'm really interested to hear more about from listeners. There's something about the writers obviously living through that pandemic that I would imagine has impacted the show in more subtle ways or indirect ways. I think there's something in the show about questioning reality. What is real? Is this real? Suddenly we're all living in a very upside down world, and a world that we, a year later, a year of working from home, a year of not seeing family and friends in kind of the ways that we're used to, there's probably a real impact somewhere in the show, and maybe that's something to wait and see what listeners think. I don't know about you. Do you think, now that we've been through the recording process of the second season, is there anything the second season is doing or giving us that feels more indirectly linked to the year that we've just had?
I think so, yeah. Even outside of like protests and like, I guess, the more like political issues and like social issues, I think so. I think there's something about just the experience of how our relationships with people change under like circumstances like these, like whether it's friends, whether family. I think in some ways, thinking about just confinement, like in a literal but also an abstract sense, I feel like we dip into that. I think there's something about just the experience of like life in a very weird time and not really knowing what's going to happen next, and not necessarily, and finding it hard to trust the people making those decisions as well. Sometimes I feel like we really tapped into that, and I feel like the characters express a lot of frustration. Definitely a lot of frustration that I've had. I definitely see in tiny ways here and there a bit of myself in a lot of those characters, and it's not even I didn't act to write anything, so
I think that's right. I think that kind of, there's so much unexpressed emotion experience from this year. Like, I think there's still so much for us all to discover. And I don't know about you, Rob, but the idea of returning to sort of social environments, work environments, like I think it's fascinating as to how we're all going to navigate those things. Also, and look, this is something that is perhaps happening here in the UK, but there are, again, and look, this is the mark, I think, of great writing, and these are writers who are not directly referencing specific events, but they are certainly reflecting, I think, on the world and how it impacts upon young people, upon society. Here in the UK, there is currently a debate and a lot of press attention around a new bill that is sort of passing through Parliament around policing, that is, in light of recent events in the last couple of weeks in London, getting a lot of scrutiny. The right for the police to shut down demonstrations, the rights of the police to curtail what has been seen for so long as the freedom to protest. And actually, one of the biggest conversations we've had over the last couple of years is about protesting. Who has the right to protest? What does effective protest look like? How do young people protest, violent protest, non-violent protest? And the events of the first season specifically speak to those ideas. Here in our second season, we're not wanting to give too much of the narrative away and wanting people to experience it themselves is important. But I think say that this notion of what happens after a protest, a large scale protest, the vacuum that leaves, the kind of people who maybe feel that the battle is over, that's something the show definitely contends with. And then obviously that realization that there's still more work to do is something the second season picks up.
Something about the consequences of it as well, isn't
exactly.
there? How you can have a really big action like that and then realize actually the scope of this is so much bigger than we realized before.
Absolutely. And we meet new characters this season who bring very different takes on protest and beliefs and standing up for yourself and direct action as well. The characters in our show, they are teenagers themselves. Leah and Suze are two young women who have, just lived through a hugely, violent set of experiences in the first season, and we joined them about a year later. And I hope that listeners to the podcast this season will really enjoy the journey they both go on, both as friends and as individuals, and these new characters we meet who are hustling in their own way and who are trying to hold the government to account, who are trying to ensure that certain freedoms aren't lost again. And I think all that's really interesting. I think there's always going to be a political thread to this work, and a lot of the work Boundless does with young people, it's very hard not to talk about politics and not to talk about lived experiences. You and I have had so many interesting conversations about who actually has the ease to protest. It's not easy for everyone to protest, whether that's climate change, whether that's student protests, which we've seen a lot of over the recent years, or in fact holding vigils over the course of the last few days. We've seen again the sort of severe policing of a vigil in Clapham in South London. And also I think conversations around and this is a delicate thing to talk about, but when a protest gets airtime and when a protest and the treatment of protesters doesn't capture the imagination. We lived through a year last year of Black Lives Matter, and we've still got a huge amount of work to do to ensure that the police are held to account. And I'm fascinated again as young people are driving conversations around protests that we give space and we offer in our way kind of narrative and storytelling to try and allow people to talk about the right to protest, the freedom to protest.
And I guess also with like the relationship of just like how art and culture kind of have connect into that as well. I think while you can't really have one without the other, I think sometimes people just expect one of those things to be the driving force for change. That radio, like literally like the device of radio in the series, both in like real life and also just in what we've made, has been such a massive tool for that. Like it does disseminate art, music, word, stories, but also public information and kind of actual conversation and stuff like that. And I think like we really see how the various ways how that gets used. And I think both in just like the last year particularly, but also just like through what we've made as well. And I think maybe that's because all we've had are remote kind of ways of really interacting. So it's just naturally happened. We've been naturally just more aware of it and more attuned to it because of that.
Yeah, I think the show is heavily inspired by pirate radio, and in that sort of development of the first series, a lot of our conversations with Nina were about DIY home or otherwise kind of broadcasts and what that did for British music and subcultures and youth culture. And as those broadcasts were eventually shut down or outlawed and regulations were brought in to curtail that, some of that found a way into mainstream culture. Some of that found different avenues, but also something was lost. And I think even in our internet culture, there is so much to consume. It is technically easier than ever to create a podcast or post a video to YouTube, build a community on Instagram or TikTok. And yet actually there is a role, I think we both believe in, as you're saying, art and culture, trying to hold space and kind of start and hopefully engage many people in conversations about the world we're in. And this podcast is at its heart, I hope, a story that is written, with compassion and sort of authenticity from a kind of youth cultural perspective. Our artists, our creatives, this team is a diverse group of young adults, and the cast, it's been so great to grow the cast, to welcome new actors into the company this year. We're working with an incredible performer musician, Amanita Francis, who I'm really excited to introduce to listeners in this season. And I think what I'm really enjoying about this process is we can have conversations about the world in a safe way as a group of artists, and then try and find a useful way to translate that in a way that isn't heavy I'm aware of how easy it is for artists to become very pretentious about what we do and the impact we have. But I think the joy of my job and working with early career creatives and thinking about storytelling is we can do a little bit of good, right? We can help start a conversation, continue conversations about the world we're in. And I think everything that we're still living through and the lived experiences of so many young people who are around the world still left out of too many conversations, I've been talking over the last couple of weeks about sort of Boundless's values, and it's a piece of work we've been doing with the team, and we were talking to various people about them, and we have an advisory group of young adults, and one of the things that came up was this idea of empowering. And you often get this with organizations or companies that work with young people, we're going to empower young people. And this conversation I was having, this person said to me, I'm already empowered. I feel empowered. I don't need someone to come and empower me. I'd love someone to come and give me some space and some kind of resource and some opportunities to use that power. And it's really been on my mind as I think about not just our work as a company, but about our audience, right? Like, I think this is a powerful audience we're trying to reach, and I'm really excited for them to get to know this show again. And it's been a year since we launched it, and we're hoping we can keep on delivering more work. But the ambition here is to connect artists, young adult artists, to then give them the opportunity to tell a story which I hope has a connection to people around the world. And this second season is our kind of next go at that. I wonder, switch up a little bit, Rob, and I wonder if you can just talk to us a bit about your work outside of podcasts and like how I know you as a kind of theatre maker, a creative, a director. I know that you work a lot with writers and artists to create new work, but tell us about the career to this point. What's been going on? How have you arrived at this point as a storyteller, as a theatre maker, as an artist?
Oh, wow. Where do I? Yeah, I guess, I mean, how did I start really? I guess I started mainly out of, I'm going to be honest, out of frustration, really. I think that's pretty honest. I think thinking about when I first became interested in, like, I guess just like making stuff and making performance and stuff. And that was very like a, really broad. When you're 16, 17, 18, really, there are all these things that exist, but I think knowing what your place is in it is like totally different. So I definitely, for a while, definitely wanted to be an actor. That was like the thing that I was interested in. But I think that was just like also state of the industry, like back then as generally, like it's interesting to me how much things have changed in the last, like, if I'm going to be honest, people weren't really interested in black people on stage, to be honest. And you see that kind of on the macro level and on the micro level as well. So when I was in uni, I was doing a theatre degree and I was just, I do not feel represented. I don't feel represented in the text that we're studying. I don't feel represented in like the things that people are making, even just like the actual like diversity of the space. Again, it's not just about representation, but that was a really big thing for me. And I think in that I realized that, damn, if I want to make things or experience things of quality, I'm going to have to do it myself. I think that's when I started writing. That's when I started, because at least that gave, at least for me, a sense of ownership and a sense of kind of agency and how those narratives are made and how people are presented and represented and portrayed. And I think from that, realizing the responsibility that there is in that as well. And I think that's potentially that's what set me up really is the long and short of it. Like, how did I get to here? I think I didn't really go to drama school or anything like that kind of post-uni. It was very much learning at the job, doing little small scratch events and new writing nights here and there. There were definitely like some theatre organisations that were like brilliant. Like, Boundless has always been great. Boundless, I've been connected with the work we've done it for at least like the last like 4 or 5 years or so now, even before we started working on the podcast, for the youth advisory group as well, like through the directors program. Those are really good assisting, done a lot of assisting in the last few years as well, some smaller stuff, also some bigger scale things as well. And then where I can, making my little tiny things here and there as well. But that's it as well, isn't it? And it's interesting about the thing that you said about like power as well, like empowerment. Often what it is, with whilst there is always that element of development, I think in a lot of artists, usually a lot of us know what we want to make or know what we're interested in or know where we're trying to go. It's about kind of resources, about time, it's about who's got the money, it's about, and then that's when it becomes that conversation around kind of things around like class and things around nepotism, all of that.
And learning,
that's when you really see it.
Yeah, exactly. Learning that no matter how empowered you feel with your ideas, you need support to keep using that power or developing that power. And I think we need to remember that. We need to remember it's not just about hearing an artist out and kind of saying, that's a great idea, off you go. It's about constant ongoing support. I find that's motivating me in my work here. I think it's about trying to create a sort of diversity of experiences as well. And I think it's about, we've known each other for a number of years, first through your engagement with the advisory group. I've known you as an artist. I've seen your work outside of anything we've made at Boundless. And now it's great to have a second season of this show to work with you on, even though we've made it in such unusual circumstances. Obviously, we've not had that chance to be in a space together. All of our work is like this. It's on Zoom and trying to like swap an email or a WhatsApp and trying to find a way to keep that going. But to share in that process is also really important to me. Like it's nice. I genuinely find myself actually enjoying stepping further and further away and being here to support and make sure people feel held and looked after. But it is important exactly as you say, that like more resources made available over time. It's an ongoing relationship. It's a chance to fail. It's a chance to test new ideas. I think all of that's really important. And I also really hear you when you say that those early motivations to get into theatre or storytelling kind of creativity is about, I don't see myself, or I don't see myself in the way that I want to be seen. So I'm going to have to create those opportunities for myself. And I think that is such a shared experience. I've heard that so many times. I know you have. We've heard that story, right? A version of that story. I was really struck, and maybe this is a controversial thing to say, but certainly fiction podcasting is not the most diverse space to be in either. And there are exceptions. There are some creators out there, and we've swapped notes on some of them, and there's some really great stuff that we love listening to. But it brings me joy that like you and I can collaborate with a wider group of artists as well, who, and by diversity, like are starting out and more established, like Freddie and Joe at Father, who are our incredible kind of composers, sound designers, editors, working alongside Amanita, working alongside our cast. I'm thinking of Mary, who we've welcomed into the cast this year, and our writers, who are like Sardin and 17, as I said. It's been really exciting to bring some of our values and our approaches from theatre and British theatre, which is not getting it all right at all, but compared to some other places is a nice few steps ahead. And I'm really hoping that sort of diversity of expression and lived experience and kind of culture and kind of heritage, all that stuff is creating a much richer world that we literally wouldn't be able to create otherwise. So I hope in some way where for you there is an opportunity to take your work into different spaces, which I think as an artist in 2021, especially an artist trying to navigate the closing of theatres or the kind of closing of kind of creative spaces temporarily, do you think it's important for artists to develop their practice in such a way that they can work digitally, they can transform what they're doing into different spaces?
That's a double-edged sword. I think if you want to, then you definitely have the right to, and I think that's something that I've definitely only really learned, I think, in like the last like year and a half or so, maybe slightly before this all kicked off, because obviously we started working on this 2019, but like realizing, oh, actually, I don't just have to do one thing. There was a long time ago, I was really like, I'm definitely going to get into like TV and film and stuff like that. And then getting into theatre, I was kind of like, oh, I can only do one. There's only enough hours in a day. Sometimes that's very much like a practical thing, feeling like you actually have enough time and enough kind of energy to do all of these things. But I think also just realizing that actually like everything kind of moves at different paces, and I think that's okay. And it's not a case of, oh, but I have to have been, in X and Y, Z place by 25, otherwise I'm a failure. Like that is shit, to be honest. It's a lie. But it's something that a lot of us have been told so many times, it gets into your head. That's often where people get really anxious about what their careers are, like the imposter syndrome of kind of, why am I not XYZ person who's done this by this age or whatever. It's okay to go at your own pace, and it's okay to explore the things that you want to explore, whether that's in a really kind of broad way or that's a really focused one as well. Both of them do have their validity. I think that's just kind of it, really. There just does need to be a bit more, I think more so with theatre. I think other mediums aren't so bad at it. I think art's good at it. I think to some degree music and even on screen. And I like the word content, but like it's a good kind of encompassing for everything. I think theatre is the one that usually is quite bad at it, and I think it's only more recently, other than like outside of actors and like the occasional like superstar or a director, that we're actually really starting to embrace that a little bit more in the industry. I think that's it, because of the necessity of having to try and make work in other ways, which is why like literally every other person's got a podcast now. But actually making a fiction podcast is different. There's still not very many of those, which is interesting because in some ways the resources are a lot less intensive than trying to get loads of people at a stage at the same time in the same space. In other ways, obviously, like now, like it's a flipping nightmare, isn't it? But
I think, yeah, I mean that it's worth unpacking that a bit, really, because I suppose yes, it's been quite refreshing to learn a new form. And you're right, I mean, fiction podcasting, there are some amazing, inspiring kind of shows that we've passed backwards and forwards. I mean, we started talking about Night Vale, which is maybe where a lot of people start, but I'm thinking of like Carrier, for example, which I was really inspired by and enjoyed when you shared it with me. And I am surprised that we haven't seen more of a boom in the last couple of years here in the UK. We're a country of storytellers, right? There's a strong storytelling tradition here, and just coming out of the theatre, let alone film and telly and elsewhere, I think there is an opportunity to get more stories into this format. And I'm sure that we'll continue to see that. I hope that those stories reflect the sort of diversity of thought that we're excited by, and I hope that in what can be a more democratic space. Historically, unless your show's going on the radio, audio was something that you were not going to engage with probably. So I think, yes, it is easier, although this year has been a real baptism of fire. We'll talk a little bit about the process here, which we're all at home. And our cast and our team are spread all over the UK. Our exec director has done an amazing job at pulling the logistics of this show together. And that includes basically setting everyone up with a home studio. And specifically with recording drama, we needed a kind of multi-channel recording solution so that, the cast can hear each other, Rob and I can hear each other. We can do our pickups, we can look after the energy and kind of the pacing of the show, which is quite different to what we're doing now, where we're having a conversation, we're recording this over Zoom, and we can see each other and we can hear each other really well, but there's an informality to this, which is fine, and I hope people enjoy and make some excuses for. But like on the show, we wanted to protect that kind of high spec, high quality record we did for the first season. We're working with Father again on the design, and that meant finding a solution which worked for us in some ways and then didn't work in the ways we wanted it to. So we had to overcome a huge amount, technically teach ourselves a huge amount, and the result, I hope, is going to pay off. How did you find that sort of more remote relationship with the actors or the writers and kind of the actual recording process? And we spent a few days rehearsing, but how did you find that recording process?
I think in some ways there are pros and cons. I think at least I'm never going to pretend that like I don't miss doing stuff in person. Yeah, like that's just never going to change really. But I think what kind of has been interesting is, I think in a way being distant has kind of meant that we had to be more focused with our time. I think in some ways that kind of helps me because I'm definitely I definitely can enjoy going off on a tangent sometimes, or just enjoying when other people do, whereas a case of like, no, well, look, we're here now, we've got to work in a cleverer kind of way. So I think that's good. I think in some ways I think when in the best version where we understand everyone's in a different kind of space, actually that kind of helps unlock like a looseness, which if you're vibing like really well in like a rehearsal room kind of environment or in like a writer's room kind of environment, you can still get a semblance of. Again, there's a lot of things you do miss out on still, but it didn't feel impossible. I think, it never felt impossible. It never felt, oh my God, we can't do this in this kind of way. It's just more of a case of, okay, we just have to be a bit more receptive and a bit more kind of aware. And I think also as well, like it did bring a lot of lessons as well, like thinking about just the fact that like both our writing team and our actors are kind of based all around the country, whereas last year everyone had to be in London. I think there is something nice for me because I always want to work like across a broad margin of kind of like the people who exist in this industry, both nationally and internationally as well, but that can often be really difficult when you're all confined to one place and traveling is like expensive and unethical and all that kind of stuff. So, in some ways, actually, this has been really helpful in this kind of way.
Yeah, no, you're so right. Like in a way, we've gained so much. Like we've learned flexibility, right? We've learned that it's important to have your standards and fight for that kind of high quality, high standard approach, but also I've been trying to learn this, like just to allow the internet to be an issue, allow the setup to not be quite what we had last year, but to really believe that the team we've assembled, which I have so much faith in, and it's been really great to see people solve problems. And this year with the pandemic has been many things, but perhaps we've found solutions to things that we wouldn't have otherwise. And we've definitely learned, right, that this is possible and we can open up the opportunity and we can work with people in different places and in a way that I think has still been quite enjoyable. We've had a laugh with people. I'm certainly looking forward to like having a drink or a celebration or something with the whole team. Like it's weird there are people that we just haven't met in person. That's been the strange thing about going through any creative process this year. There are just whole projects where we just haven't met people in person, and my Zoom game is all right, but it's not amazing. Like there are better people who keep people engaged, and running a rehearsal room, running a recording sort of session and trying to keep people just energized has been a real lesson. We're also being hugely ambitious here. There are 12 episodes, and the episodes probably like coming out about 20 minutes this season, and that's a huge amount of storytelling, and I'm really glad we've got there. When we do release the show, again, I'm really looking forward to how people are responding to it. And that's also quite nice, right? Like we don't have that easy, flexible relationship with our audiences in theatre. We have a critical relationship with people who are reviewing the shows professionally. Sure, in the last few years, if people really love the show, they might tweet about it. If they really hate the show, they might tweet about it. But that's also quite rare, I think. What's been lovely about the podcast is people just leaving a review, telling us what they made of it, kind of telling us what they thought about the show and sharing it and engaging and building a community, which is something I'm really excited about this time around. Really, hopefully finding those ways to meet with kind of our listeners and build the kind of community that we're really proud to be part of around this show, and meeting more people, whether that's digitally, remotely, or in person, is something I'm really looking forward to. So like, to wrap us up and bring us to a close, like what are you most excited to share with this second season with audiences? Like, what tease something for us, Rob? If I'm saying to you, let's get some new listeners, let's get people to go and listen to those first 5 episodes and come back and stay with us for the second season. Tell me about Radio Lucia. What's going on? What's to be expected?
What's to be expected that I'm buzzing about? I'm just thinking about the sound and like the literal sound and the music. I think that's something that I think we've had more space to lean into the actual radio part from like a more like broader perspective, which I'm really looking forward to. And also a bit of romance, which I think at this time, I think there's definitely like a part of me is going to be like, oh, fuck, I don't really want any of that. But I think, yeah, I feel like in the way that we've done it, and I think like who it involves as well. Like it's just interesting how actually like love can be political. That's just a very
yeah. I'm gonna I love that. That is your big reveal of this chat. You can expect a love story in the second season. I'm right there with you. That's something I'm really looking forward to. Yeah, not giving anything away, no spoilers. And then look, I'm gonna ask myself that same question, but I'm really excited by the new characters who've been introduced. Some of those are major new characters, and some of them you're not going to spend very much time with, but I have a feeling we might be getting more from them in the future. Also, I think the world gets much bigger in this season, and I'm really looking forward to how that connects with people or doesn't. But I'm really glad to have seen our writers really pick up from where Nina left off and go places, and this season definitely feels bigger. But yeah, we're really looking forward to sharing it with you. Thank you so much, Rob, for this conversation. It's always a real pleasure to not just talk to you about Radio Lucia, because that is always great, but just to get a chance to talk with you and hear about your work and where you're coming from. And I think the more people who can hear from you, the better. And so thank you so much for joining me. You can listen to Radio Lucia. You can listen to the first season. It's currently wherever you get your podcasts. There are 5 episodes to enjoy, and we are getting close to launching the second season. You can follow us on social at Boundless Abound or at Radio Lucia, and we'll be posting over the coming weeks and months. The launch date is going to be shared very soon, so give us a follow, chat to us, DM us, get in touch, let us know what you thought of the show. And we genuinely want this to be a conversation with our audience. Please, if you love it, share it, pass it on, reach out to us. This is always better when it feels like a community. And thank you very much for listening. I've been Rob Drummer. I'm one of the 2 directors of Radio Lucia and artistic director at Boundless. I will pass over to Rob for a goodbye.
I'm looking forward to just hearing what everyone thinks.
Thanks, Rob. Thanks, everyone, for listening. Be ready, be listening. Do not be afraid. This is Radio Lucia.